Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 9th of August 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, and myself, Brian Gerrish.
Well, we're starting with Trump and Putin. And Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, has been over in Russia and put out this tweet saying that he was honored to deliver a letter from President Trump to President Vladimir Putin's administration. He emphasized the letter emphasized the importance of further engagement in various areas, including counterterrorism, enhanced legislative dialogue, and resuming cultural exchanges. Well, that's all very good. Dmitry Peskov, the presidential spokesperson for Russia, said a letter has been delivered through diplomatic channels, and I expect the president will receive it shortly. So this, of course, has caused all kinds of furore in the United States. So in order to try to distract from this, the US has decided to impose sanctions on Russia as a result of the alleged chemical attack which took place allegedly on British soil, which allegedly poisoned two Russians, then allegedly poisoned two British, anyway, it's all pretty allegedly. The US have decided to put these sanctions in place. Not clear exactly yet what these sanctions take the form in, but some people discussing the potential of more restrictions on exports from the United States and so on, and more financial sanctions. So the State Department said that it had been determined that Russia had used chemical or biological weapons in violation of international law, or has used lethal chemical or biological weapons against its own nationals. So there are plenty of ors in there. We're not quite sure exactly. But anyway, yes.
It must be very difficult for the Russians to form foreign policy against nations that are split personality, which is what we're seeing with the US at the moment. And we're certainly seeing it at the UK. How do the Russians form a sensible foreign policy when you don't know what you're going to get from one day to the next by an individual nation state?
Well, I would say they'd struggle to form foreign policy because they're rolling around the floor laughing most of the time. But anyway, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office absolutely delighted with this move. They said the strong international response to the use of chemical weapon on the streets of Salisbury sends an unequivocal message to Russia that its provocative, reckless behaviour will not go unchallenged. The Russians had their own things to say, including language like far-fetched accusations that Russia had become accustomed to not hearing any facts or evidence, and that the Russians continue to strongly stand for an open and transparent investigation of the crime committed in Salisbury. Well, you're not going to get one, I'm afraid. Britain is determined on that. Well, Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, he weighed in this morning, and he said if we're going to stop chemical this was on Twitter. He said this: if we're going to stop chemical and biological weapons becoming a new and horrific 21st century norm, states like Russia that use or condone their use need to know that there's a price to pay. Thank you, USA, for standing firm with us on this. Unfortunately, he had a couple of other tweets in draft, Brian, but he didn't put them out. But we got a chance to see them. And one said, of course, Britain can't impose sanctions itself because that would hurt the City of London, which relies on the dirty money of Putin's oligarch opponents. But as I say, Jeremy Hunt didn't actually put that tweet out because it stayed in draft. But, you know, this is the point. Many people asking today, well, it's all very well the United States putting sanctions on, but why isn't Britain putting sanctions on? Jeremy's tweet there sums it up. And he finished off with another statement: isn't the special relationship wonderful? So yes, well, indeed it is. And Gavin Williamson was over in Washington yesterday to try to strengthen this special relationship even further. He was speaking at the Atlantic Council, and he also met, as you can see in the photograph here, the Secretary of State for Defence, James Mattis. Gavin Williamson, of course, the United Kingdom Secretary of State for War. So he's over there. Let's see what Mattis had to say. First of all, he said, clearly, as we sit here, we realise that the special relationship still thrives. So I think that's a pretty non-committal statement, really. It doesn't really say anything. But Gavin Williamson himself had some wonderful things to say. He said, please never underestimate my nation. That's Britain. As we have changed the world time and time again, we will change the world in the future?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to say Britain isn't his nation. It's my nation, as far as I'm concerned. I think this man is working for another nation, and I think the policy now is becoming very clear. The rules-based international order, which the Conservatives are so keen to get into place, is nothing to do with the well-being of the United Kingdom, Britain, whatever we want to call it.
Absolutely.
I think they're on a trend of something else. But I have to challenge the Minister for War, because I think Gavin made a few mistakes. Let's have a look at what he also said here.
This was during the Atlantic Council speech.
Yes. Yeah. Britain is a major global actor. We've always been a tier 1 military power. We always will be a tier 1 military power. UK's independent nuclear deterrent, world-class special forces, cyber capabilities and exceptional conventional forces are able to deploy independently around the globe. So that's what he had to say, reported there in The Guardian. And I thought we'd just have a look at reality. So we're a tier 1 military power, except for the following. We don't have any maritime patrol aircraft. These are critical if the UK is going to help America in particular to counter Russian nuclear submarines. But of course, David Cameron scrapped all of these aircraft and thereby decimated Britain's anti-submarine warfare capability. So we simply do not have any of these aircraft. We haven't got any fully operational Type 45 destroyers because, of course, they can't work in warm water and they've got major engine problems.
Well, they can't work in cold water either, apparently, because the last time one left Plymouth, it broke down about 5 minutes out of the Sound.
Well, this is true, and it's been widely reported in UK press and media that these things are spending vast amounts of time in harbour because they're not fit to go to sea. And before somebody takes a pop at me for pointing this out, I don't get any pleasure in pointing out the perilous state of our armed forces. But I believe that we have to tell the truth about the state of our armed forces. If we don't, ultimately it's the men and women who serve whose lives are going to be in danger as a result of idiot policies by the likes of Gavin Williamson. Well, let's go on through. Operational nuclear submarines, well reported that at one stage we had difficulty getting one nuclear submarine to sea. That's apart from the nuclear deterrent subs. But when we tried to get the help of local MP, Conservative MP Gary Streeter, to flag this up, he came back with a pretty abusive personal response to me. But this is the state of it. We haven't got sufficient warships anyway, so if eventually we do manage an aircraft carrier fully armed with aircraft, we're not going to have sufficient escorts for it to do anything on its own. Well, we haven't got any operational aircraft carriers yet. We're working on it. It's jammed tomorrow. But the big problem is when the carrier's operational, we don't yet have any proper operational aircraft to go on those carriers. Independent nuclear deterrent. Well, we know that in the background, the Conservative government is simply dismantling the independence of our nuclear deterrent because, of course, the weapons facilities are now being fully integrated with the French. And this is part of EU military unification, which is carrying on behind the utter lie of Brexit. We have not got any replacements lined up for the obsolescent Harpoon and Sea Skewer missiles. So that's surface-to-surface, air-to-surface missiles. This has also been reported in so-called mainstream media. Can we go on? Yes, because we haven't got any trained, experienced manpower, especially warfare and technical. In fact, it's the engineering experience which is so bad at the moment that this is one of the reasons that they can't repair the perilous state, particularly of the nuclear submarines.
And they're trying to bring people out of retirement to help?
Well, I was going to mention that for this last one because they haven't got the more senior engineering and technical specialists for refits and new build. We were made aware some months ago that people 63 years old being called out of retirement in order to try and help get warships through routine refits. This is a major breakdown within Britain's military, and of course this has been engineered particularly by the Conservative government, so complete pack of half-truth spin propaganda by Gavin Williamson. But he can, as Mike's just has just said, get over to speak to the Atlantic Council, where he said that Britain will remain a global power after Brexit. This is just interesting stuff. Britain will remain a nation that champions those fundamental values of freedom, democracy and tolerance. Well, that includes rendition flights for torture of people. It includes the abuse of child abuse survivors. We'll be coming on to that later in the news. Culling the elderly, we know that that is now going on with a vengeance. Suppression of free speech and creation of a fascist state. So what do you think, Mike? Is this result of opium from Afghanistan, or is he just hallucinating, or is this man reframed, he actually believes what he says?
Well, it may have been fentanyl from Salisbury, but anyway, that's another story.
Well, it is. So the important thing is why would our Minister for War go to the Atlantic Council? Well, this is what they say they're about. They're working together to secure the future, renewing the Atlantic community for global challenges. They promote constructive leadership and engagement in international affairs based on the Atlantic community's central role in meeting global challenges. And on it goes. Well, we always say to our audience, do your own research. And if you do your own research on this, go and have a look at the people involved. Now, I just had a look at a couple. We've got pretty aggressive retired American military people. Their interest, as they state, is simply America's best interest. So that doesn't even include Britain. We've got a bit of a split personality here as well. But this one caught my eye. This is the chief executive, Frederick Kemp. Before joining the council, Kemp was a prize-winning editor and reporter at the Wall Street Journal for more than 25 years. So we have a newspaper reporter summons Britain's Minister of War to tell him, presumably, what he thinks that young Gavin should do.
Yes.
This would be humorous were it not for the fact that, of course, it's think tanks like the Atlantic Council that are producing the very policy that schoolboys like Gavin Williamson are then putting in place. And the dismantling of UK's military is all part, of course, of helping the structure of EU military unification. And the EU military bloc then forms part of the trilateral programme of the Americas, Europe and Asia, China-Asia. But we'll come on to more of that in a future news programme.
Okay, now today the government has issued its new civil society strategy, which is subtitled Building a Future That Works for Everyone. But are they? Now look, this is fundamentally about the relationship between us as individuals and the state. And this is probably one of the most important documents that the government has published in quite some time. This first civil society strategy, it's the first they've produced in 15 years. They say it's going to build stronger communities by bringing together businesses, charities, and the public sector. And this is exactly what we've been warning about for a very long time, bringing together businesses, charities, and the public sector. Now, why is this important, and why is this a problem for us? Well, they're saying that the strategy proposes significant reforms across the public and private sectors to build a fairer society. We'll come on to what that means shortly. They say that people, communities and charitable organisations will be at the centre of decision making. This is big society on steroids, but here's what the main bullet points of what they're talking about. So unlocking £20 million from inactive charitable trusts. So they're going to steal money from inactive charitable trusts. And this is going to support community organisations over the next 2 years. And it's going to be carried out in conjunction with the Charity Commission and UK community foundations. They're going to launch an Innovation in Democracy pilot scheme in 6 regions across the country. This will trial creative ways for people to take a more direct role in decisions that affect their local area. So this is kind of extending the participatory democracy idea to include pilot schemes to get people to vote on or have local referenda and these kind of things. It might include citizens' juries or mass participation in decision making on communities' issues via online poll or app. Okay. They're going to establish an independent organisation that will distribute £90 million from dormant bank accounts. More stealing of money out of bank accounts. Now these are dormant bank accounts. They say that if you suddenly realise that you had a dormant bank account and you'd forgotten about it and you'd forgotten the money was there, that you can come back and reclaim that money at a later date. Well, it doesn't matter. It's still stealing people's money. Creating an independent organisation to use a further £55 million from dormant bank accounts. What else are they going to do? They're going to support charities to make their voices heard on issues that matter to them. They are going to strengthen Britain's values of corporate responsibility through the launch of a major new leadership group. We'll come back to that. They're going to use digital technology for good to improve the work charities can provide. Does that mean for the benefit of people, or does that mean they're going to use digital technology forever? I think it means forever. But anyway, they say improving the use of Public Services Social Value Act 2012 to ensure that organisations can generate more social value for communities. So this is what Jeremy Wright, who is currently the Digital Minister, the Secretary of State for Digital Communities, Digital Culture, Media and Sport, he said our plan stands side to side with the industrial strategy, supporting its drive to grow the economy while creating an environment where people and communities are at the heart of decision making. So this all sounds very good, but let's just remind ourselves of the fusion doctrine, because that's what this is all about. This is bringing businesses, charities and the public sector together with government, blurring the lines between them and removing any kind of restrictions on their activities. Can we demonstrate this? Well, yes, we can. Let's have a look at the sort of opening words from the strategy document. It says, for the purposes of this strategy, civil society refers to individuals and organisations when they act with a primary purpose of creating social value, independent of state control. By social value, we mean enriched lives and a fairer society of all. So there's that word fairer again. But what is social value actually? Well, let's go to the big lottery fund, which of course is one of the big funders of the big society. And of course, this is all about doing good, Brian. Creating social value is all about doing good. But when we actually look in a bit more detail, we find that it's common purpose ideology wrapped up in nice language. As evidenced by the fact that Julia Middleton has been writing articles for the Big Lottery Fund on this issue. And of course, Julia Middleton, the founder of Common Purpose, this ubiquitous so-called charity with political aims that provides leadership. And if we go back to the document again, to the main bullet points, of course, what they're talking about here is a major new leadership group. So here we're seeing common purpose connections right through this. But here's the key point. This is the main danger of this whole thing, right? Because the relationship, what is the relationship between us as individuals and the state? It's based on this. The state may do nothing but that which is expressly authorized by law, while the individual may do anything but that which is forbidden by law. This is a fundamental part of the common law constitution in the UK, and it applies to every common law nation in the world. And it was established formally by a piece of case law at Entick versus Carrington in 1765. It has existed since then. It's existed for a lot longer than that. That piece of case law simply rubber stamped what was already in existence. But here is the attitude of the local authorities. And this is John Tradewell, who was at the time Director of Democracy, Law and Transformation at Staffordshire County Council. And he says a local authority has the power to do anything. No, it doesn't. Let's go back to this. The state and its representatives, like a local authority, may do nothing but that which is expressly authorised by law. Tradewell says a local authority has the power to do anything. If the local authority has the power to do anything, then it has the power to put you in prison without due process. It has the power to do all kinds of things.
Well, let's remind people that why were we interested in this gentleman? Because he was part of Staffordshire County Council, which was taking children's babies, wrenching them out of the hands of their crying mothers, and trying to go after UK Column for exposing this heinous behaviour by Staffordshire County Council. And he was part of the legal team who no doubt assisted producing their court documentation.
Absolutely. So here's the full quote. A local authority has the power to do anything. Those are the words that everyone will hear and understand, as well as freeing us from Parliament. The power will give us independence from government. We, not Westminster, know what's in the best interests of our people and communities.
Right. And remember that when the term we is used in reference to a county council or a city council, we're actually talking about the cabinet, who holds the power within that authority.
And not the elected representatives.
Not the elected representatives. So cabinet may only be 8 people, of which the chief executives usually control them like a private fiefdom. And of course, they're backed up by the vast numbers of people in their legal department. So these are very, very dangerous entities. If they believe that they have the power to do anything or everything, and that seems to be the case, then they've got all the tools to impose that power on the public, even though it's public money that's been used to pay their salaries in the first place.
Absolutely. And I just say again, people should read that quote and fearful of it, because look at what he's saying. Freeing us from Parliament, independence from government, we, not Westminster. This is spectacular language.
This is hidden city-state language.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's going right through this whole city-region policy. This is a fundamental change in our relationship with the state as individuals. And this new civil society strategy takes it a step further, because by merging government, local government, charities, the private sector together to, in quotes, do good, they're giving all these bodies the idea that they have the power to do anything, to ride roughshod over the rights of individuals. This is unlimited power. Well, look, we've been talking about this for a very long time. There are a host of articles on the UK Column website which have been trying to highlight the dangers. Here's just one of them, which discusses the issue of fairness and what fairness means in this new context. And I just have to say, I urge everybody to that's watching this program or listening to this program to try to get to grips with what we're talking about here, because the implications are huge for our futures and how we are governed in the future. People need to be paying attention and taking action now on this. And
the simplest action you can take is to share this material. Once you've researched it yourself and you're happy that what we're saying is correct, share this material, question your MPs, give your local councillors support. There are still many, many very good local councillors who could do something if they understood what they're being threatened with. We're going to have a little look at some of that in a minute. But exposure of what's happening is a very, very powerful tool, because these people do not like the thought that the public is observing what they're doing.
Okay, well, Jacob Rothschild has come out of the woodwork. Not often that he makes the mainstream press, but RT reporting, a Reuters report here, that he is worried about the New World Economic Order. He has voiced concern, according to RT, about the global financial system that was established after World War II. He points to US-China trade war and Eurozone crisis as the key problems putting the economic order at risk. He said that in 9/11 and in the 2008 financial crash, the powers of the world worked together with a common approach, common purpose perhaps. He said cooperation today is proving much more difficult. This puts at risk the post-world economic and security order. He said that potentially destructive debt levels in Europe and trade wars are major problems for the global economy. And he said the problems are likely to continue in emerging markets, compounded by rising interest rates in the US, which has drained global dollar liquidity. And he said that the lack of a coordinated international response to global challenges was unlikely in an era of populist and protectionist leaders such as Donald Trump. So it doesn't look like he's terribly optimistic that the West is going to unite to help maintain his now defunct financial system.
They're worried. This
Absolutely.
is really good. If people want positive news, it's starting to come through now, because we can see so many of these supposedly very powerful people beginning to panic. The charities are next in line, because of course they're not charities. The major ones are not charities. They're political instruments of this new communitarian system. And exposing what they're really up to is very, very damaging for those charities. This is simple things that people can do if you say, what can we do to stop this? Let's have a look at good people. Now, this was sent through to me by several people. It's a few days ago. Daily Mail. The headline is Labour Councillor 68 quits over plans to let transgender people access women's toilets and changing rooms. And the subheadlines there say Anne Sinnott stood down from Cambridge City Council over the transgender policy. The council fails to recognise female-only facilities needed by women as generality. 68-year-old councillor also said the council insidiously dismantled women's rights and claimed that transgender opened female-only facilities to higher numbers. Now I'm going to say, from speaking to local councillors who often now work under immense pressure, very bullying and domineering management styles inside many local authorities and city councils, it takes some courage to do what this lady did. Let's have a look at her. This is a picture from that article. And one of the things she said was, in central Cambridge public toilets, a man in male clothing aggressively asserted his right to be there to shocked women who all turned silently away. Now, the key bit about this is that this councillor, who is clearly applying common sense to my mind, is forced out of the council. So she's the lady with the common sense. She's the lady with the courage to stand up and say what's happening is right. What happens is she is forced out of the system, and that's one problem removed for the system. This is the same policy that's now decimating good teachers in education. It's happening in the NHS, it's happening within the military, it's happening in charities even. So this is where the policy now dictates who can actually work for the organisation, and if you dare disagree with the policy, then you're either going to have to resign or you're going to be forced out. So if we have a look at a little bit of the detail about what she had to say. She said, I do not want to be a member of a council that fails to recognise that female-only facilities are needed by women as a generality. She added that the council insidiously dismantled women's rights. In a letter to the council's chief executive, she said there were between 4 and 37 people in Cambridge who had had gender reassignment surgery based on national figures. But she said using the term transgender in the policy opened up female facilities to infinitely higher numbers than the term gender reassignment. The latter would only allow those having sex change surgery or those going through this process. So this woman's got some courage, but she's had to resign. And unless councillors like this lady get support from the public to back their concerns, the policy which is doing the damage will simply continue unabated. Well, we just remind people that this coming Saturday the 11th, there's a talk on 5G in Totnes Civic Hall. So if you're local and can get along with that, we'd like to see you. Graham Downing is going to be speaking and Mark Steele. It's possible I may also have a small slot to speak, but this will be well worth going to, as the 5G is coming, and the sooner people can learn about how it really works and what the possible dangers of 5G are, the better it will be for everyone. Now, let's return to the case of Melanie Shaw. We've got a great deal of information circulating about Melanie and her case in Leeds Crown Court day before yesterday. I'm losing track of my days now. Now, one of the things that came up is that several people had raised questions about Melanie's fingers, and it was said that she got fingers bandaged, she'd got fingers that were bleeding, she was missing fingers. And I'm going to say we've treated this with caution. We were not in a position to really confirm this or not. But we've had some more information in from some very reliable sources, and I'm just going to take you through some of this to see where we get. So this was an email sent to us. Dear Brian, I don't want to take up your time, but having been to Melanie's hearing, I thought I might be able to clarify 1 or 2 points from my perspective, though that may differ from others' perspectives. There was an opaque screen separating the public seating from the proceedings. We went in and out of the court 3 times, so I sat in different seats at different times. At times I could only see the judge through the opaque screen, so could not register his body language or see his facial expressions. I could not always hear the judge clearly when he addressed the court, and believe this was related to not being able to see his face clearly. Melanie was always obscured behind the screen. The prosecuting counsel and Melanie's defence solicitor, not counsel according to their website, Mr. Rafiq, were always obscured behind the screen, so I could not judge their body language or facial expressions properly. Through the screen, I did see Melanie hold up her left hand and thought she said she only had 9 fingers, meaning digits. I recall there was white, what appeared to be strapping on 2 fingers, possibly with one end dangling down at the time I looked. To me, it looked like the 2 fingers in the white strapping with the index and middle finger tips, but I can't be certain as I was concentrating on listening and I do have eyesight problems. On dates, the judge was trying to speed up the production of a record of what Melanie said in court so it could be provided to Professor Shaw or other professionals, and I recall he put in place a hearing on the 5th of September on fitness to plead. He tried to tie that in with the prosecution witnesses being able to attend. Somehow prosecution counsel said witnesses are only able to attend 4th, 5th October. I recall the judge asking if Mr. Rafiq would be able to attend on the 4th and 5th. He checked his diary and said he'd be able to. The prosecution was driving the dates of any hearing. I understand the judge cannot bring in his own points, so it was down to Mr. Rafiq stating that HMP style is the best place for Melanie. That is the main point here. He did not mention other options, e.g. health service or bail. Now we're going to say at this point, and we have got other information which I'm afraid we are not able to share with you, but from the information we've received to date, the UK column believes it's not true that Melanie Shaw has lost fingers or suffered significant damage to her fingers. We've been told this by a number of sources, but some of that information I still have to be guarded about. But this is a fairly confident report by the UK column. If anybody has evidence to the contrary, then we will be happy to look at it. So where does this take us? Well, we were very interested to be sent this article. It's from Human Rights News, Views and Info. It was written on the 26th of October 2017. It's time to talk about solitary confinement. Now, of course, we've been pointing out that Melanie Shaw is an immensely vulnerable and certified disabled child abuse PTSD sufferer, has spent over 18 months in solitary. Here is an article which I'm going to encourage people to read and use because it is absolutely talking about the dangers of solitary confinement. And if we just have a look at a couple of the comments here. As a disciplinary measure, individuals tend to only be confined for a couple of weeks, but in some cases, prisoners have been kept for up to 11 years in solitary confinement. The impact is devastating. Research has confirmed that individuals in solitary confinement are at risk of isolation syndrome. They lose their grip on reality. They become anxious and depressed. Shockingly, a 1993 study in the US found that 41% of those in solitary confinement experienced hallucinations. It's as if the whole world has disappeared, and this space that I occupy is the only space that exists for me. That's a quote by a gentleman called Victor Pate, who was quoted in The Guardian. So think of what that article is saying at that particular point, and you introduce an immensely vulnerable child abuse survivor who has already got mental health problems. What are you going to get? And when Melanie appears in court, Many people said for certain she's been drugged, but we don't know the damage that 18 months solitary confinement has done to Melanie Shaw. The article went on, basically here in a 2015 study in the UK, almost half of the individuals interviewed reporting experiencing at least 3 of the following symptoms: anger, anxiety, insomnia, depression, difficulty in concentration and self-harm. The authors found that one prisoner in particular had been moved from segregation unit to segregation unit in 5 different prisons for a period of more than 10 years. The World Health Organization have acknowledged the disproportionate number of suicides that occur in solitary confinement, while a brief to the US Supreme Court also found every study of confinement longer than 60 days found evidence of negative psychological effects. The effects are worsened when individuals already suffer from mental illness, and it's often mentally ill prisoners who end up in isolation as their symptoms lead others to view them as difficult and disruptive. So this is the environment to which Theresa May, formerly Home Secretary, now Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has placed a vulnerable child abuse victim, not for 60 days, but for over 18 months. Now that woman is brought into court with no proper care for her in that environment, and she's to be charged with actions she would have taken while she was undergoing the torture of solitary confinement. Could she have been hallucinating? Well, will these be defences that will be brought into the court hearing? We don't know, but we can guess by the track record to date in the United Kingdom, it's unlikely. And the gentleman who wrote this article, you can find here on LinkedIn, Harvey Slade, and I was very interested to see that he was promoting an event, the 5th to the 7th of September 2018, the Penal Reform International and the Vance Centre are organising the conference Women in Prison, Evidence, Advocacy and Reform to advance the creation of a global movement for improving women's conditions in prison. Now, I'm slightly suspicious of the organisation for a number of reasons, but if we take them on face value, could it be that a concerted effort by members of the public concerned for Melanie to get something done by this organisation would be good for Melanie and would also test the mettle of the Penal Reform International? We will see. But I have to say that article is one of the best that I've read, setting out the dangers of putting people in solitary confinement for long periods of time. And remember, if you're listening from overseas, from the United States, or from France or Germany, further afield, this is the state of Britain in 2018 under Theresa May's Conservative government, standing on the world stage, lying to others about democracy, freedom, etc. But the reality is people brutalised in their gulag of prisons. And of course, it takes MPs to do the real job. So here we've got the man, and of course his name is going to go straight out of my head, Chris Leslie. I did smile at this photograph because he's here visiting some former police station. The lady's got police written on her fairly muscly arm there, and hands in pockets, all very casual. He's desperately concerned about the good work these people are doing. What he hasn't managed to do is investigate the abuses by Nottingham police of Melanie Shaw, and despite Melanie working for him in person as a helper some years ago, he doesn't seem to be very proactive on defending Melanie's case. But what's interesting, if you have a little look at his Twitter page, at the moment, excuse me, he's very big on anti-Semitism. So this appears to be top of his list. It says, the experts of the UK delegation to the IHRA reflect on the working definition of hashtag anti-Semitism and its relevance in the UK. So he's very concerned about anti-Semitism. He's not so concerned about the brutalisation of child abuse survivors. And he's also concerned about other people because we've got this one, solidarity with @Lucian Berger for her fortitude in the face of yet another death threat, thankfully leading to conviction today. She endures extremist and anti-Semitic abuse daily. How can we stop this? Only zero tolerance. What a hypocrite this man is, that he does nothing to protect his own constituent being brutalised in prison, but he can stand on the world stage helping to stand up for the so-called anti-Semitic defence. I find this truly shocking, but of course it's only the public bringing him to account that's going to make a difference. And we'll end today by saying once again that the Melanie Shaw postcards seem to be extremely popular. People understand how this simple vehicle gets a message out very quickly. We're pleased to say that we have just, or will shortly have a delivery of more. So if you haven't got any of these postcards, think about who you can send them to. Polite, measured, powerful messages are best, but have a look on the UK Column website and you can find details as to how you get them. And I'm just going to end on this note. It's a very unpleasant article, but I'm going to bring it in at today's news because I think it tells us something. The headline is 3 men due in court over the murder of baby killer in Welsh village. This is sort of the meat of it. Sorry, I have to call this up for myself so I can see it. During Gaunt's sentences in 1985, Mr. Justice Caulfield described the murder of a toddler as the worst crime in the land, adding the person murdered was a defenceless little baby, and on the jury's finding, you not only murdered that child, but also tortured him. The toddler's mother, Jane Pickle, who was then aged 23, had been out drinking and left Gaunt to look after her 2 young children. Now that man, it would appear, has been murdered. 3 men are due in court. We're really starting to see the breakdown of law and order here, and not surprisingly, my inference is we're starting to see people wanting to take the law into their own hands. So this is the penalty for allowing our justice system to be stripped, secret courts, juries to be more or less pushed to the side, the public to be prevented from seeing and hearing justice being done, as you heard from the lady's testimony in the courtroom with Melanie, opaque screens so the public couldn't see what was happening. The result of all of this seems very likely to be increasingly people want to take the law into their own hands. This is very dangerous. If the wider public wants to stop it, it has to be exposed, and we will say we need your help to do that. That's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. A big thank you to people who've recently sent in donations. If you're not a subscriber of UK Column, please subscribe, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.